In this video, we're going to talk about just putting those last final touches on your rigs once they're finished. And we're going to look at making sure the rig is 100% ready for the animator, whether it be you or someone else. Now, one thing you may want to do is add a master control for your rig that allows you to, with one null object, move the entire rig around inside the rig comp. Now, keep in mind that with a 2D character rig, the master null that we're going to add will not allow us to scale the rig or to flip the rig. You would need to actually flip the entire rig comp inside the scene comp in order to flip him horizontally or vertically. So our master null that I'm going to show you how to add won't do that. But I should mention that Duik has a script called import rig into comp that will actually make a copy of your rig, all of your controllers, and be scalable and flippable. Be aware, though, that this function takes a very, very long time to copy, especially if you have a moderately complicated rig. But we can add a simple master null easily enough that it'll at least allow us to position the character inside the rig comp to give us room at the front or the back or below or above as we need it. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a controller without having anything selected. And let's size this up and color it and position it just underneath our rig, and we'll name it Master. Now we need to parent the hand and foot controllers and the cog controller to our master. But remember, these have all been zeroed out, so what we really need to do is parent the zero nulls back to our master. So we want to come down here to the bottom of our rig, and we want to select all of our hand and foot zero nulls and the cog zero null, and parent those all to our new master controller. Now when we pick up and move that master controller, we can move the entire rig around inside the rig comp. And then of course we want to zero that out, and like we want to do with all of our controllers, we want to lock the properties that we're not going to need. Now before we go on talking about adding our finishing touches, let's look at another usage for the master null. It can be very, very handy. You may have noticed when we were working on the Fox that he's actually not placed in a very optimum way inside his rig comp. There's really a lot of empty space at the bottom. He's more likely to stand on his hind legs or jump. He's probably going to need more headroom than room at the bottom here. So you'll note that I've already added the master and parented everything in, but I haven't zeroed it out yet. And now what I can do, if I accidentally rig my character not optimally placed inside the comp, I can click and drag him and position him in a place where he'd be a little more useful, and then I can go ahead and zero out that master null. Now I've basically corrected the problem of having him not situated correctly without having to completely rebuild the rig. Now when you're preparing to deliver a final rig, one of the things that you're going to want to do is go step by step through every control. Just try every single button, every slider, every angle control out, one by one, step by step, and just make sure that everything is working. Ultimately, the best way to test a rig is to animate with it. If you have the time, do a little quick, simple animation trying to use as many controllers as possible. Rigs are so complicated that it's very, very easy to forget just one or two little items along the way. So checking and sort of beta testing your rig is highly advisable, particularly if you're handing the rig off to someone else. Now another thing that you're going to want to check is to make sure that you've set any comps that are using time remapping or that have comps nested within them using time remapping. You'll want to make sure that you have that advanced setting on the comp that says preserve frame rate when nested or in render queue. This is really important to make sure you don't have any drifting with your time remapped elements, like hand selectors, mouth selectors, eyelid blinks, that sort of thing. So I would recommend actually opening up your comp folder, going through each comp, particularly the ones that deal with time remapping. If you know, for example, like here, the upper leg, that was just to move something around a little bit, you wouldn't have to bother with this. But the eyelids, the hands, the props, all should be double checked to make sure that that setting is set properly. Now, of course, you also want to double check that you have locked and shied all your layers correctly. It's a good idea to just open things up, have a look, make sure all the locks are on, make sure you're not seeing any null objects that shouldn't be there, and just get all that cleaned up. Now, we've been doing most of that cleanup as we go, but at this stage you want to double, triple check and just make sure you've got everything locked up. Then we also want to make sure that our properties are locked that we don't need. And again, we've been doing this as we go, but it's so easy to miss little details with these rigs. So I would recommend selecting all your controllers and just go through all your properties and just make sure that you've got all the properties locked that need to be locked, and the ones that don't need to be locked are not. And rotation is one in particular where you're going to want to stop and just make absolutely sure that you've locked controllers that don't need to rotate, but you've allowed controllers that do to be unlocked. Now, to get the rig ready for animation, it's a couple steps we want to take. One of the first ones we can do is to hide the parent column. That immediately gives us more screen real estate for our animation, and it really isn't necessary to have the parenting open once everything's rigged and everything's locked up. You shouldn't have to even be thinking about the parenting. Now, the last thing we want to do, and if you've taken the Character Animation Bootcamp course, you know exactly why we're doing this, is we want to set hold keyframes at frame 0 at all of the neutral values. This makes it really easy for the animator to begin creating key poses with holds on them, and it gives you a column of neutral keyframes that you can always copy and paste forward when you want to return your character or a part of the character to neutral. Now, if you haven't taken Character Animation Bootcamp, understand that what we're going to do is create those neutral keyframes at 0. And then the procedure is that you never start animating at frame 0. You start animating 10 or 50 or 100 frames in so that you preserve those neutral keyframes and can always copy and paste them forward. So what we want to do first is select each controller, and we want to turn the stopwatch on all of the controls that we've added. Now, there's a few we can skip. We can skip the Bezier IK offsets, but we definitely want the neck controller. I generally will check on the IK orientation, but unless I know I'm going to use it, I skip the FK and the different FK controllers. And again, you can edit this if you have a very clear understanding of what you probably will be using and probably won't. I never add the goal because it's so unlikely that you're going to uncheck that. But everything else you're going to want to go ahead and check on. I usually skip IK orientation on the legs, but we'll do the heel and toe roll. And now I'm going to Command A to select all the controllers, and I'm going to open the position value and grab keyframes on all those positions. And then on rotation, of course, I want all but the 2 that are locked, and we want to go ahead and add keyframes for that. Then I can again select all, hit the U key, and now I have all of my animatable attributes all keyframed. And then I'm simply going to select the whole column, Command Option click, and add my hold. Hit U again to close everything up, and now my rig is 100% ready for animation. Now move on to the exercise video, and we've got a 2.5D head for you to rig and a quadruped for you to rig. And make sure that when you finish those rigs, you go ahead and go through all of your cleanup and finishing steps as we've gone through here. And you also may want to go back to some of the other rigs you've been working on in this course and do all that cleanup work too, just to get in the habit and get some practice. But remember that the #1 function of a rig is to make the animator's life easy. So taking these extra steps to make sure everything's working, everything's locked, everything's safe, and you've got those neutral keyframes set at frame 0 will really help the animation process.